Hey guys, welcome to the Primitive Podcast, where we take a deep dive into all things leadership. Thanks for joining us today. On today's episode, we have David Bateman. David is the CEO of SitePro, which is a really cool oil and gas and municipality technology company. You're going to enjoy this conversation. As always, thank you for listening and for joining us for the Primitive Podcast.
You know, I think that being a leader is really, you need to set up the most key relationships for the business and the company that are going to establish it into what you want it to be. So that can be, employees, customers, investors, industry alliances, things like that. But, I view my role as a leader is to really recruit and, bring on the best team that I can, get out of their way, let them focus on what they're good at.
Well, David, it's great to have you here. Thanks for joining the Primitive Podcast. I've known you for quite a while, but we've never had an opportunity to kind of really dig into your story, and I want to revisit the origin story of your company, SitePro, and so I'm excited to hear that. But thanks for joining us.
Hey, pleasure to be here. I've enjoyed listening to some of your podcasts and the work that you guys are doing.
Cool. Well, we can now note the record that at least one person listens to our podcast, so that's exciting. So for those of our listeners who don't know who David Bateman is and don't know much about SitePro, just maybe give a brief background of your story, and then tell us a little bit about SitePro.
Sure. So, I'm David Bateman. I'm the chairman and co-CEO of SitePro Inc. We're a fluid management tech company that focuses historically in the energy space, but have recently expanded into the municipal and agricultural markets. So we provide technology that helps give our customers visibility to their fluid-based systems, whether that's pipelines, storage facilities, or whatever it might be. We give remote operations and visibility, assistance through our technology and services. So, we've grown pretty fast. It's been a great ride, and a little bit about me. I met the other part of the equation with SitePro, Aaron Phillips, the other co-CEO. He was one of the first guys I met at Texas Tech back in 2004. We were both, young industrial engineers, and we used to talk about how we're gonna, never go work for the man and take over the world. And then, I went and go. As soon as I graduated, I went and worked for a big corporation. So, but Aaron and I always kind of stayed connected, and wanted to look for opportunities where we could, build and develop, technology that we could leverage for the future, and really change, how something is done. We met a group in Midland that had a bunch of water midstream infrastructure, so like produced water, saltwater disposal and injection facilities and things like that. And we, whenever we met with them, it just seemed to be this need for this remote asset management. I mean, traditional SCADA systems didn't quite fit the bill for what these systems needed. They needed not only remote operation capabilities, but also like ticket and commercial transaction management, who's taking loads, what time and when, and then also the safety and environmental, compliance measurements that you can gain from technology. So, we kind of developed a system. I remember meeting with those guys, and Aaron and I pulled out of their office in Midland, and I said, "Well, Aaron, you think you can put in a system like these guys are asking?" And he's like, "Well, I was sure hoping that you could, since you just promised them we would." And, and I think that goes to say with entrepreneurship. I mean, sometimes you got to put yourself out there and reach for opportunities. And, so that's really how we started with SitePro. And we since, at the time we entered the market, I think in 2012, and it was a great market in energy at the time. We could do no wrong. A couple of young, mid to high 20-year-olds running a business, and, the downturn hit, I think, in 2015. So we grew like wildfire for the first 2 to 3 years, and then the downturn hit in 2015. I always tell people we had to learn how to actually run a business, and got more efficient, and started expanding out the facets of our technology and services to other parts of the space. And whenever it came back, we had like 12x growth in 2 years. So it's been a really, really crazy ride. We've put together a really, one of the best teams in the business that I'm, happy to be associated with all of them. And it's been a great story. So that's a little bit kind of a slower elevator pitch of what you're asking.
No, that's great. No, it's really great. And I get excited thinking about, kind of your entrepreneurial journey and, what I assume were these really fun kind of creative conversations. You're really excited and you're kind of huddled up and you're thinking about the future. And I sometimes wonder why entrepreneurial companies lose that. It's easy to kind of get bogged down into kind of the business of an established company, but brings back lots of great memories in our own entrepreneurial journey. What do you see your role as a leader? Like when you think of your team, when you think of your organization, and you think of leadership, what comes to mind in terms of what you believe to be your responsibility?
I think that being a leader is really, you need to set up the most key relationships for the business and the company that are going to establish it into what you want it to be. So that can be, employees, customers, investors, industry alliances, things like that. But, I view my role as a leader is to really recruit and, bring on the best team that I can, get out of their way, let them focus on what they're good at. And as we've grown the company, we really, whenever I talk about that big growth that we had, I mean, kind of a glass ceiling I felt like we were hitting at the time was, it's a founder, two founder ran business, and like, how do you expand from that? Well, once we started sharing the responsibility and focusing on what we were good at and eliminating the distractions of what we're not good at and bringing in people who are good at that stuff, that's whenever the growth really just started happening, like a huge tailwind without us forcing it along. So that was a big thing. So I think my role as a leader and, anybody's really is to, recruit the best people you can, develop some of the most key relationships, and then also, build in the cultural discipline, that is needed. I mean, one thing that, we really try to emphasize with our team is just like, if you make a commitment, do what you say you're going to do. And if you don't, then don't commit. And, I think that, that's something we've tried to really implement in our culture. And, we have a good team that, there's a lot of trust in our organization, especially at the leadership level.
What's your experience been like building culture? Like for you guys specifically, have you done that intentionally? Like have you intentionally tried to kind of define and document your culture and then implement that culture, or has it been more organic? Or what's your experience been building a culture?
Well, I'd have to say it would be more or less organic. I mean, we have some materials and stuff that we put together from time to time, but it's really, on the fly coverage.
Evolving and growing as you go.
And just in instilling certain things and, being a good listener and, really making sure that the team kind of understands the expectations. I mean, Jonathan Cox, our COO, he has a good thing that he always says. He's like, process is whenever somebody's handing the ball to the next guy and he's taking it down the field. He said, culture is whenever somebody slaps the ball out of their hand and everybody's scrambling. How does that team get it and recover it and take it? That's the difference in culture and process. And, I think that, they're both inherently important, but that's something we focus a lot on.
That's cool.
Trying to make sure everybody, understands the goals. And, I think too that, if you have a organization that's customer service oriented, you kind of have to have that as a base foundation.
That's really good. What role does vision play in y'all's company? Like when you think about, vision and where you're going and communicating that to your team, and feel free to be real practical, do you meet with your team on a weekly basis, monthly basis, annual basis? Do you craft a vision and say, hey, here's where we are, here's where we've been, and this is where we're going? Or is that too also for you guys organic?
That's a lot more structured. I mean, we, as far as vision, I mean, you can't manage what you can't measure. Right. So, I mean, how do you measure, if a vision is working? Well, financial results, awareness in the marketplace, different things like that. So I think whenever I think about, vision, it's really, from the leadership level, it's trying to be an effective communicator on what that should be, and then having a team that's open enough to help you build what it is. For instance, one thing that we always say with SitePro is we really hope that there's a lot of disagreements in meetings. because it kind of crafts it gives a couple of rounds of iterations to craft the best result. And then and that's ultimately the vision. So for instance, practically especially with this COVID downturn stuff and the energy crisis, I mean, we knew that we needed to get into the some other markets, and we knew our technology could do it really easily without a lot of force fitting, so to speak. And what we were able to do was just kind of craft, hey, here's why we think this works, and really get people bought into where we're going, what it's about, why we're doing it, and how they can help. And I think that that enabled us to successfully kind of penetrate municipal and agricultural markets. But and we had some opposition along the way. Some guys oh, I don't know, maybe 2 years from now, and we just don't have time for that.
Right.
And we just there's a book by Napoleon Hill that's pretty interesting, and the title's funny, but it's Think and Grow Rich. But Napoleon Hill was was a guy that Andrew Carnegie had hired whenever he was like 80. He said, I want you to go tour around the world and visit the most successful people that are around, and write a book about what makes them successful so other people can use it. And the underlying theme is essentially that the most successful people visualize what they want, and they won't take no for an answer to go get it. And it's just really that simple. And but so I think from a leadership perspective, and if you're organizing a team, you just have to have clarity and openness on what that vision is.
That's really good. What have you learned about yourself in 2020? I mean, you talked about the downturn, you talked about a little bit about the pandemic, and kind of how your company has responded and tried to be creative. But what are some things you've learned about yourself? Good or bad. I mean, I think it's important. To just tell me what have you learned about yourself?
That I can take a lot of blows and keep getting up.
That's good. Yeah, that's good.
I mean, I would say personally, I mean, there's been some interesting things. One thing, that we really learned is, family's important. This staying at home, being with them all the time. Like, I feel like, for the prior years to the pandemic, I was so focused on schedule and hustle and bustle, and, for instance, I came straight from my house to this meeting this morning and worked from my house, and was around the kids a little bit. Used to, I would never in a million years do that. I would be right at the office, get 2 hours in, and then come up here.
Right.
But so there's things like that. I think the time with your family and what's really important is one thing, and also the perseverance and new obstacles continuing to come around the corner, and how to deal with them dynamically and evaluate them and not make rash decisions. So
yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, those are all great things. And it's interesting what you say about spending time with your family and kind of adapting the way that you work. I've always felt like there's you hear people from time to time, like leadership folks or whatever, say you don't have to work these huge, big, long hour weeks to actually be productive. And I'm like, no, it's impossible. Like, if I work 60 hours and the other person works 40, I'm going to be more effective, get more done. And it's not always the case, is it?
Right.
And I really appreciate what you said about spending more time with your family and things, because it's this weird thing where it actually makes you better at your work. Like, so you may work less hours, but those hours are way better and more productive. And so it's interesting insight that you share. When you think back on the SitePro journey, like, what have you learned about through failure? I mean, you've probably hit some home runs and you've probably struck out some. So, what have you learned from failure, and do you have a process of learning from failure?
Oh, absolutely. I think, and first of all, I think failure is a natural process in evolution. So, like, it's you almost need to fail a couple times to get it right. What have we learned really, though? I think is it's really just the focus. I mean, I always say focused effort. Like, if you want something to be successful, you just got to focus on it and make it happen. Things will typically, fall off the rails and stuff from time to time, and I think that's what ultimately teaches you. I always tell people that, there's a funny saying I say about companies and ranches. Would you like to know the one thing they have in common? there's always something to fix.
That's really good. That should be the tagline for this podcast. That's really good. How do you approach your own personal growth? As a leader of a company, you got all kinds of things pulling at you. You got clients, you got product, you got employees, you got investors, you got stakeholders. So you have all these moving parts. So how do you focus on your own personal growth, and what does that look like?
I've been really fortunate to have a really good team that I associate myself with, and some really good, investor partners, board members, things like that have really kind of helped, influence things that we do, both inside SitePro and outside. I mean, I have a lot of mentors and things that I don't have any association with the company with. But also, I call it a fractional mentor strategy. It's really good to have different people you can go to advice for specific things, general things, and not just having one person. And also, you need to kind of formulate how you think. I think sometimes conversations about things you have going on with people who are influential in your life will help you shape how you really feel about it. And so I've been lucky enough, been fortunate enough to have some really great people that I can reach out to. And some of them are, every day, some of them are, twice a year, different things like that. But, kind of help me formulate the vision and the direction we're trying to go. So
that's cool.
I think, personal growth is doing that. And then also with faith.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, are those also the things that you do to stay kind of inspired? I mean, I think it's easier. It's easy to think sometimes about personal growth as reading books and listening to podcasts and accumulating knowledge, and sometimes maybe a little bit more difficult, to do things that nurture and cultivate, staying inspired and staying a visionary. So, like, what are those things for you, even outside of work, that really that kind of fuel that? Does it make sense?
Yeah. I think totally. I think time outdoors with my family is probably number one. Cool. I mean, I just sometimes I'll, like my wife and I married an old girl from a ranching family, the Nail Ranch, Emily Nail, and we'll go out to the ranch sometimes and won't see anybody for a couple of days, and it just allows some real premium focus.
It's awesome. Yeah, no, it's great. It's really good. I mean, I think there's a reason some of the best presidents in history went to the outdoors, where they needed to get away. So that's great. Who or what have been some of the biggest influences on your life? I mean, I know a minute ago you mentioned some mentors, but like specifically who or what have been some really critical kind of, things that have shaped who you are and how you lead?
I think it's, as Aaron likes to put it, jumping off the cliff and getting started as an entrepreneur. I think it's the willingness and the appetite, to do that and striving to do it. Like you said something earlier about ambition. I mean, I think, what really keeps me going is just trying to develop and build something of what I want it to be. I always have a vision for the future and, what that ought to look like and working towards it. Family and, employees and friends and all that are a big part of that and kind of that sphere of influence and what it might be. But and does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, it does. I mean, I think, there's just so many things that shape us. And if you don't identify the right things, then, you're not shaped by the right things. And so I'm just always intrigued by, asking the question, like, who or what is shaping you?
I've had some people, a couple things that noteworthy on that. I had a guy one time told me, he said, like, one of the key things in business is don't compromise who you are to, accommodate, a partner, customer need, so don't let that shape you. And then ultimately also, one of the guys on our board, I love this saying, and it's real simple, but he says, we need people on our team that are smart, hardworking, and honest. And, if you can check all three of those boxes, we want you. But if that doesn't happen, well, maybe we ought to prioritize our time with another relationship.
Yeah, it's pretty simple, isn't it? I mean, I talk about old school. I mean, that's about as old school and simple as you can get, and yet extremely powerful. That's really good. If you could speak to your younger self, like if you could go back 10 years, prior to starting SitePro or right about to start SitePro, and you could give yourself advice based on what you know now, what kind of advice would you give to a younger David?
it's not the it's the destination. It's not the journey, or not other way around.
Yeah,
sorry.
yeah.
It's the journey, not the destination.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is hard when you're ambitious and
Yeah.
you know you're just plowing ahead and you're trying to make things happen. I mean, has that always been easy for you? I mean, to take that approach?
No, it hasn't. And the older I get, I learn it more. I mean, you know, I'm always like, oh, well, it'll be good when we get this, or you know, I'll feel like we're successful when we have 20 customers. I'll feel like it's better when the revenue's this. I'll feel like it, you know, and that constant drive and pulling at you. You know, I think that's always focusing on the next thing instead of embracing what we did. It's like, wow, we just did this, or you know. And sometimes it takes looking back. You know, like we'll look back at the last couple of years. It's like, whoa,
wow,
let's not forget what we just did.
Right. No, it's good, and it's easy. It's easy again just to be so focused on where you're going that you do lose touch with that, and you don't learn from it. But then you also don't enjoy it. You know, because you didn't take the time to enjoy it. You know, I don't ask this question to everybody because not everyone on this podcast is an entrepreneur and a business owner, but I'm curious for you, like, you know, we're around the same age, and I think a lot about our journey the last 9 years. What are some of the aspects of the journey, now that you bring it up, that you've really, really enjoyed? I mean, what are some of the parts about building a company and building SitePro have you really enjoyed?
Putting together the team.
Yeah.
I mean, that's probably number one. I mean, you know, putting together the team and, you know, building that, you know, kind of building the framework and, you know, a structure that makes that will work and propel it into another dimension.
Yeah.
And that's like, what are you building? It's like, I feel like this whole time we've been building a foundation. We've grown a lot, but, you know, it's like I'm always trying to, you know, let's make the Army stronger and bigger. And
yeah, man, I resonate with you on that. I wish we could have 1,000 teammates. I mean, I completely agree with you. I mean, there's been so many fun things, but like building a team and like the relationships that come through that, like by far is the most exciting thing. And I always admire, you know, I'm good friends with Robert Taylor, and, you know, United has tons of employees and team members, and I always admire that because, like, if I had my way, we'd have 1,000 people here. You know, we wouldn't have any money, but we would have a big team. So that's great. Well, thanks for your time, man. It's been fun learning from you. Just really proud of what you've built. I mean, it takes so much grit and tenacity. I love what you said earlier, like about what you've learned. You can take a lot of punches, you know, and you do. I mean, even outside of a global pandemic and economic crisis, it just takes a lot of tenacity. So you demonstrate that.
Well, hey, I appreciate you saying that. And I would say that the last thing to kind of leave it on is let's not forget it's hard work. Yeah. You know, I think that some of this, you know, future generations and everything, like, you know, one thing, and I heard, you know, I've heard a lot of people say it, like, you know, it requires a lot of hard work and you got to be willing to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I know it's an essential part of it. Thanks, David. I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Thanks.